Hey guys, welcome back to FPL Fran. Today's video is going to be a Game Week 34 team selection video. So obviously a massive double game week for the season. I understand a lot of you are going to be using chips as well, but I will just be simply using the two free transfers that I saved up after rolling in Game Week 33. Let's just quickly review the team. I got very lucky, of course. Got Steele, who saved a penalty. Kept KANE. I mentioned, of course, that it was very tempting to go Salah and Isak, and actually a lot of people, as far as I can see on Twitter, on other platforms as well, just simply went for this -4 going into Salah and Isak. But I also mentioned that it didn't necessarily make sense to me because I wasn't pressured from a price changes point of view. I know a lot of people move there because they have plans, for example, next week to go into Trent and so on and so forth. But because I already have Trent in my team and I didn't necessarily need Salah for a West Ham away match, I sidestepped the move and I simply rolled the transfer. So very lucky, of course, though, in the end to still get a very good haul from KANE, and really lovely to have Rashford back as well. The only detriment really to this team was that I benched Fernandes. If you guys were on the deadline stream, I think I've made a mistake, of course, because I actually benched Fernandes during the stream. So a loss of 3 points, but I think I'll take it. A relatively good rank rise. I'm very happy, of course, to continue the climb. But I think Game Week 34 is probably where my greens will stop. Ultimately, I do think, as I said, many people will have chips and potentially better transfers to make. I do want to use my two free transfers to the best extent and also in a way to also plan going forward. So looking at my team now, it's very clear that KANE's going to be that sort of cash cow towards Salah. I know some people might be going for KDB as well, but I do think that there's going to be minutes management, right? You have the Real Madrid match right after the Game Week 35 game, after they play Leeds, and City will have to rotate some players. Even Grealish in my team might be subject to rotation. However, I also have Fernandes as well, who costs a lot of money, and maybe I can actually use that extra money to be flexible in Game Week 35 to see what happens, pending injuries, pending whatever happens, because we're expecting, I think, to roll there on Game Week 35, but there could be some crazy things that can happen. And I don't really want to restrict myself too much when it comes to, if I was, let's say, to go out of Grealish into Salah, what that would really mean for my team. But let's actually quickly go to the defenders this week for Game Week 34. It's pretty standard, actually, simply since I'm not going to be making any transfers there. And the huge plus, of course, for Game Week 33 was that Steele was someone who started versus Nottingham Forest. And of course, people were looking towards the performance of Robert Sanchez in the FA Cup semi-final. And he looked really good. De Zerbi even made some comments about the fact that he played well. And so, of course, some people were scared that Steele might not even start that game. But the fact that he did start versus Nottingham Forest and he saved a penalty gives me a bit of confidence, at least, to go into Game Week 34 without having to waste money into a transfer away from Steele into another player. So that's sort of why I'm keeping Steele in my team. Trent, Shaw, and Trippier, very standard options. I've had Shaw for a while now. Unfortunately, of course, he was injured for a long time, but now he's back. Sort of playing left center back, which is a little bit sad. I think Maguire not playing is not exactly beneficial to someone who owns Shaw like myself. But at least I think there's a chance, of course, that he can play left back. And the ideal thing with Shaw is that he's nailed in this team. So you're looking at the safest United asset from a defending point of view. He won't have to deal with early substitutes or even a random benching. As far as Trent and Trippier, these two options, I think Trent has become essential to this Liverpool team in the recent games. And of course, we've seen earlier in the season where Trent has been benched. We've seen games where Trent has been subbed off a little bit early, but now I think Trent is almost essential to the team, and I can't really see him missing out any of these two games, particularly at home. And as far as Trippier, of course, probably one of the best games of the season, because what sets apart a team like Southampton from some of the other relegation contenders is that their attack has been very dire. So we just saw Bournemouth, for example, get away with a clean sheet versus Southampton. I think we could see a replication of that quite easily for Newcastle, and that's why Botman is also going to be the first on my bench. Simply put, Southampton rank within one of the worst attacking teams in the league, and actually their defense has been better than average, right? So when you compare to some of the other relegation threats that they're facing, a lot of them have much worse expected goals conceded, whereas Southampton do not. The good positive, of course, with Newcastle is that they have been absolutely lethal from the attacking point of view. So I don't really think that idea that Southampton is a better defense than other relegation teams really matters, because you're still contextualizing them as a bottom half team. And of course, Newcastle have ample opportunities to score. As far as the midfield, though, I will be keeping Grealish and I will be transferring out Fernandes. So going back to my previous comments when I was looking at the review of my team in Game Week 33, clearly my transfers out towards Salah would either have been Grealish or someone like Fernandes. Fernandes costs a lot more money. He holds a lot more money in the team. And my concern, of course, with keeping Fernandes is that even though I think he'll play 90 minutes for the next 2 games and Grealish might be rotated, I don't think the forward options that I could get from Fernandes were worthwhile, particularly if I was to, let's say, go for Fernandes plus a Greenwood or a Lyle Taylor, someone like that who is simply a budget option, which would force me to play Botman, which I don't really love, since we've seen, Newcastle slip a few clean sheets, of course, but it just feels a little bit low ceiling, right? Even if I was to go for a single game week, right, I'd hope that they have a very, very high ceiling as opposed to a very safe clean sheet, but nothing else beyond that. So that's why I've gone for Fernandes out. I do think Grealish is a huge risk, right? I don't think Grealish necessarily will start both games. What we've seen recently, though, is that he has been starting a lot of games. So if we go back to my idea about how Man City might rest and rotate on Game Week 35 versus Leeds, then there could be a good chance for Grealish to do well versus Fulham and West Ham. So that is kind of the thing that I have going with the Grealish assumption. Foden, of course, is someone that we've seen recently coming on as a substitute for Grealish, which of course makes me a little bit scared to keep Grealish, but I still think that he has impressed all season long, hasn't really made any mistakes, and I do think that he will maintain his spot in the side, hopefully at least for this double. As far as McAllister, Mitoma, I don't really want to move them, and I think a lot of people are very, very low, I suppose, on this Brighton team. They did struggle, of course, versus Nottingham Forest, but the chances were still there from an attacking point of view for this Brighton team. So ultimately, they're playing 2 games at home, which is a huge factor here. We've got Brighton being one of the better attacking sides at home this season, and ultimately, whenever you get to play at home, I think you also feel that there's going to be some security there in terms of the defense, and hopefully we won't see such a calamitous performance like they did when they played at the home of Nottingham Forest. As far as Rashford and Salah, I think these were always options that I was going to go towards because I already made the early move towards Trent in Game Week 31. So because I already had Trent in my team all this time, I now have the space really to go to get Salah and Trent in my team. Now, I don't have Robertson and I don't have Jota, as you may see with my forward picks, but the reason is because I don't think I want to invest that much into Liverpool. Ultimately, they only have one double. I don't have a free hit chip. I do think that there will be time, of course, to bring Fernandes back into the team, and that's going to be around Game Week 37 time. But of course, even KDB is going to be an option, and particularly if Grealish continues to disappoint. I do think Grealish played rather dull in the Arsenal game, but keep in mind, of course, from a tactical point of view, I mean, KDB even alluded to it in the post-match press conference, or one of the post-match press conferences that he did. But they work sort of man-to-man pressing, and it was a very unique game where like City were almost playing effectively through the center and playing route one football through KDB and Haaland, which is very different, of course, to the way that City dominate most teams. And Arsenal, of course, are a very, very different task for a team like City, even though, of course, we've seen Arsenal completely collapse as of late. But beyond the tactical element of things, that's why I have some more hope and faith in Grealish, at least for this week, for this double game week. My forwards for this week are going to be Haaland and Isak, and as you can see, I've wasted my 2 free transfers, or not wasted, but of course used them towards going for Isak and going out of KANE, which is of course super regrettable, but nice, of course, that he had a send-off with 11 points for me. Going into Isak makes sense because I just feel like Isak won't get benched for 2 games in a row. I think he'll start the game versus Southampton. And it makes a lot of sense for me to move into Isak at this point in time because of that sort of assumption that I'm making. And ultimately, Isak versus Arsenal, if he gets rotated there, it's not exactly the best fixture anyways. I have Watkins as well coming into the team and a relatively strong XI anyways 135, with maybe one defender change to be added. This transfer actually gives me more money in the bank. The alternative option would have been to go out of Grealish and out of KANE into something like Fernandes and Solanke. Now, Solanke has a good game versus Leeds, but I don't really like the idea of having 0.0 in the bank, particularly when I might want to make an exit out of someone like Zinchenko in my team. And for that reason, I wanted the flexibility of the money in the bank, and Isak gives me that whilst keeping Grealish in the team, which is another doubler which hopefully can compare quite well to Fernandes. And of course, I think the captaincy has to be slammed on Haaland. I know some people might be tempted towards Salah this week, but really, I don't think I can go against the Viking, and therefore that's how the captaincy and vice captaincy goes. That's going to be my Game Week 34 team selection. I hope you guys have a lovely week ahead, and I'll see you guys shortly.